What happens when a country stops teaching its own art history? Our guest today is art historian, curator, writer, editor, and educator Christina Barton. Across her career spanning museums, galleries, publishing, and academia, Tina has helped shape conversations about how art is understood, remembered, and presented in Aotearoa. In this episode, we discuss the future of art history education, the role of Māori art history, and what it means for Aotearoa to position itself within the global art world. Here's our conversation. Kia ora, Tina. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank
so
you
nice
for
to have you
having
here.
me. Yes.
You're very welcome. Can I begin our interview today by asking you what first drew you to the world of art history and curation?
I started art history at university when I was doing a BA. I was majoring in English and history, and I took a art history course in my second year. And somehow the lecturer and the situation completely entranced me. We went into a darkened room and we looked at pictures, and the lecturer told us not to take notes but to look and to listen, and I never looked back. It was the most extraordinary introduction to a subject that I had really not thought about previously. After I finished my BA, I went overseas, and then I came back and enrolled in a master's at Auckland University, and it was really there that I encountered the full range of courses: New Zealand art history, courses on the Northern Renaissance and the Baroque and modern art, taught to me by a range of scholars. Looking back on that time, I realised that I was actually very well trained. But it was an academic discipline, and it wasn't until I was well underway with my master's that I got a holiday job over the summer at Auckland Art Gallery, and it's there that I encountered the whole business of making exhibitions, and I was mentored by the curators there, especially Ron Brownson and Roger Blackley and Alexa Johnston. And I realised how wonderful it was to see works of art in the flesh, but also the complexity and challenge of putting works together in an exhibition context. And it's at that time that I began to go around the galleries, attend openings, meet artists, and ultimately realise that I wanted to work in the contemporary art world, even though I had this grounding in the history of art. So I've always thought of myself as an art historian who's engaged with contemporary art. So those two things might seem incompatible, but in fact they go together, for me at least, in a very important way.
I also wanted to ask you, Tina, about the decision last year by the government to remove art history as a standalone subject in our high schools. It was framed as making room for more future-focused learning. What do you think is misunderstood about what art history actually is?
Well, I was appalled by the decision, but I must say that I didn't really study art history at school. It wasn't until I got to university. And for me, the real danger is if we lost it as a tertiary subject. There are lots of subjects that you don't get to learn at school: philosophy, astrophysics, anthropology, and so on and so forth. I understand how important it is to have the opportunity to learn about history and about art. I also understand how important it is to explore creativity and the power of the imagination. And I think it's much broader than just art history. I think the concentration on STEM subjects, which seems to be the obsession of the current government, and probably preying on the fears of parents who want their children to have good jobs and be able to survive financially in the world today. I can understand the pressures, but actually what is misunderstood is the need to nurture people's imagination and their creativity. It's the only way in which we become fully rounded human beings. And I think it solves so many problems for people growing up in an extremely fragile and dangerous and precarious world, to be able to explore those aspects of their lives that are distinctly human and, I think, fundamentally important.
Part of the reasoning and rationale that at least I read was that art history, they want it to be taught within other visual art subjects in schools. Some people I spoke to said they had mixed views on this, that art history in some ways should always be taught in a visual arts subject. Some people said, others said it has to be its own subject. Where do you sit on that? Like, do you have any fears if art history is subsumed essentially by other visual art subjects? What could we stand to lose then?
I think creativity and criticality go hand in hand. And it's very important that visual arts education takes place. I mean, I think that's to some extent also undervalued. I think it can be taught alongside art history, and I wish it was better taught at art schools at tertiary level, because a lot of art students don't actually study art history. That said, art history is a standalone discipline and it belongs within the humanities. And the thing that I love about art history is that it poses a particular challenge that is absolutely unique to the subject, which is the challenge of trying to put into words what it is that we see and experience. And the exercise of doing that develops people's thinking skills and writing skills in a very particular way. And I think the wonderful thing about art history is that it draws on a range of different disciplines, whether it's history or philosophy, visual studies, cultural studies. If we lost art history as an academic discipline, that would be a disaster, absolute disaster, because it's within the university context that students acquire skills and knowledge that is not instrumentalized, it's not made instantly useful. It gives them a range of abstract skills to think, to write, to learn, to research, and it gives them a basis. I also think that there's a place within the university for more practical learning, so that students are equipped to go out into the workforce and find jobs in galleries, museums, other kinds of cultural organisations. Without that pipeline, the industry, the sector, is going to be severely handicapped. And it will fall upon museums and galleries to pick up the pieces. It will be extremely hard for them to do that. They already run public programs and stage exhibitions, but there will be more pressure, perhaps, to actually offer starter courses in art history for people who are interested and want to learn. I think there will also be additional pressure, perhaps, to do exhibitions that are more instructive and explanatory, so that some kind of understanding of the chronology of art and its evolution is laid out for people to understand. That work is necessary and important, but, if we don't have informed audiences, we're not going to be able to do the more nuanced and sophisticated exhibitions that people are going to enjoy and learn from. So it would be so detrimental to the culture at large if the subject was somehow banished or abandoned.
I wonder too, thinking about, because it is an important distinction in a high school versus a university setting, teaching it, but by getting rid of the subject in a high school, I wonder whether we're potentially removing an entry point for people who might then go on to take it at a university anyway.
I think it's a longer term problem than that. I remember being in Tate Modern in London and seeing a group of little children, 5 or 6, with sketch pads sitting around a very difficult modern work by Joseph Beuys and drawing it.
Wow.
And when you go to institutions internationally, you see children coming through and you know that they're being exposed to the whole life of culture in a way that I don't know if our children here are being exposed in the same way. I think art education needs to start from year 0. My 2 daughters, I took them to galleries very early on. We found ways to enjoy the experience, even if they weren't entirely engaged. There would always be ways to have fun in them. It's about familiarising people with the experience of looking of being in those spaces, feeling comfortable and at home. And then you can apply, learning skills and knowledge to deepen that appreciation. But, we have to bring that perspective to bear so early on so that people are not intimidated. And there's a horrible sense in which here we see galleries as exclusive and elite spaces. They are in fact free for everyone, and I would love it if people appreciated that they can just walk in, whether it's they've got 5 minutes in their day or it's raining outside, and they don't have to feel scared and intimidated by what they find there. They need to understand that it's absolutely a part of their lives, and they can enjoy it in a way that is ultimately really sustaining. So it's not just a question of doing art history at 6th and 7th form. It's actually about enabling people to enjoy art and other creative activities as something natural to their lives.
I wanted to stay with this idea of young people actually and children, because I think it is a very weird moment in the world that we're living in right now. There's screens everywhere, AI, the internet, visual media, just overload. Does that context, do you think, change how you think about art history's importance or even relevance today?
One of the real skills you learn if you study art history is to analyze visual images. And that can be applied to anything. And I think we need that visual literacy to an extreme degree, given that we're assailed by images in all of the formats that you've just described. And it's not just being able to describe what we see, what the image shows, it's being able to unpack that image and understand what's driving it and what its deeper meaning is, and how it might provide us with insights into what's going on in the world at large. And I think art history provides you with the tools to do that, tools of analysis and deep reading that enables us to look critically and not simply consume images and become passive in that experience. I think we really do need to understand where we've come from, understand how we're different and how we change, and I think art history provides the tools to do that. There is a sense that as an objective discipline, facts may be thought of as definitive, but what we do with those facts is never definitive. We're thinking differently and looking back in ways that serve us in the present and help us to understand where we're heading. There is no fixed history, even though certain things happened and we have evidence of those facts.
When you think about, Tina, art history in Aotearoa right now, what conversations feel most urgent or exciting to you?
Well, one is the survival of the subject.
Yep.
And that, to me, is very urgent, and it belongs within a wider discussion about the value of the humanities in general. And I think advocacy for our subject, my subject, and for all of the disciplines that we group together under the title of the humanities is essential. And we really do need some more support and investment in order for those things to survive, because I really do think that they have enormous benefits that may be intangible, but they will make us better people, and that is absolutely essential. So that is one of the big issues at the moment. The other is the challenge of rewriting our art history, producing new narratives that are relevant to our particular approach to our sense of ourselves in the present. So we talk about the process of decolonizing art history, of writing new narratives, and I think that is an urgent task. And I think one of the challenges for Pākehā art history or settler art history is to find new ways to appreciate what has been made over history, to recognise its complicity with the processes of colonisation, but also to understand that artists provide us with insights and tools and ways of seeing that are also independent of those processes. So I would like to see a new art history that both honours and centralises Māori art history, but also finds new ways of thinking about Pākehā art history. So it's both of those things. And it's also how they are actually entwined together. So the idea that art history is static and unchanging is completely untrue. The idea of having particular heroes and heroines is also constantly being revised. We can still absolutely admire the achievements of Colin McCann and Rita Angus, but we're also understanding that there are other artists who deserve our attention, whether it's women or Māori or whatever. So absolutely the discipline is open to change and flexible enough to actually test its own assumptions and develop new narratives.
I also wanted to ask you, Tina, I know you just got back from Venice and the Biennale, which is happening, ongoing over there at the moment. There was a workshop, I believe, that you helped run looking at the idea of operating globally from Aotearoa. What still feels compelling or complicated about us showing up in that space?
Well, Venice is very particular. Of course, New Zealand is a nation in the world, and we're constantly in conversation with other countries, and there's New Zealanders living all across the globe. So to think that we are isolated and alone on our little island in the South Pacific is really a misunderstanding of how we are shaped by the forces that are swirling around the world today. So we are engaged with the world willy-nilly. We simply are. And actually, our artists are also outward-looking and engaged with what's going on elsewhere. Venice is an incredible opportunity to encounter a huge variety of art. It's not just the Biennale, but all the collateral events and accompanying exhibitions that take place there. So it's a very concentrated way to get a sense of what's going on in the world. But it's also in a city that is ancient, that is sinking into the sea, that has this extraordinary maritime history of where, Venetians accumulated great power and wealth and built incredible palaces and churches and decorated them. And these places are still there and now are housing contemporary exhibitions. So we have this extraordinary context for seeing what is actually going on in the present. So I would recommend to anyone interested in the arts that they at least visit the Biennale once in their lives to experience just that complex environment and to enjoy the opportunity of seeing such a variety of work displayed there. The curated show that always takes place there is an opportunity to encounter at least one person or a consortium of curators' views on what is of interest and what matters in the moment. So you can't help but be thrown into the particular cultural politics of the moment, and that is extremely stimulating. And the opportunity to figure out where and how New Zealand connects with those politics, how we are a party to them, whether we like it or not, is extraordinarily stimulating. I was there with 8 early career artists, curators and writers, and we had such a stimulating time looking at everything and talking about it and thinking about it. We learnt so much about how art is being made today, what people are thinking about it, and what we think about it. It was extraordinarily stimulating.
Do you think also, Tina, thinking about the last Biennale, obviously Mataaho Collective won the Golden Line, which was a huge moment, that our voice maybe can cut through those big powers? And we often, I wonder whether maybe I can ask you whether we undersell ourselves in that regard, that actually we not only have a place there, but people want to listen to it as well?
I really get annoyed when people invoke the idea that the Venice Biennale is the Olympics of the art world. I think that's a really unfortunate analogy. It is not about winners and the best. It is actually so much more about artists in dialogue with each other, in conversation with each other, engaging with issues that matter to us today. And I think New Zealand has a vibrant and extremely important and sophisticated contemporary culture, and we are well able to enter into that conversation in meaningful and important ways. Mata'aho's success last year is absolutely proof of that. And it was such an exciting moment when that announcement was made, along with Archie Moore in the Australian Pavilion. It was suddenly that sense in which this part of the world was being acknowledged. Actually, in fact, this year, apart from New Zealand having its own pavilion, there are no New Zealand artists in the curated show.
Yeah.
So it's so easy for attention to turn elsewhere and for us to be overlooked. And that's why it's so important that we invest in an international strategy to ensure that our voice is heard, because we have such an interesting history, we have such an interesting take on how to operate in a bicultural and multicultural context. And we have so much to offer, but we need to make sure that people know that and have the opportunity to involve us in these conversations. There is so many ways in which to contend with the politics of the day, and there are some very big issues that are facing us. We were intensely aware of the politics, and each of us have our, clearly strong sense of where we stand. But actually, in some of the reading that we were doing and some of the exhibitions that we saw, there are politics that actually pertain to every single national pavilion. Even the idea that Great Britain has one of the most prominent pavilions in the entire Biennale setup, there are still off-site pavilions for Wales, Ireland and Scotland.
Problematic. It's super problematic.
There's a colonial history there that is being negotiated right now, and that is just so true of so many of the participants who are actually showing their work in that context. And I think one of the important aspects of taking part in Venice is that even within the national pavilions, which are often not really relevant today, what I find so important is that the artists who are chosen are free to make a stand and to voice whatever it is that they want to voice that is quite distinct from what the nation expects of them. So in every instance, there is an opportunity for the very concept of freedom of expression to be enacted by the artist who is there on behalf of their country. No artist who has ever represented New Zealand has ever been a kind of organ of the state.
No.
They have been offering their own independent takes that are often highly critical of the situations that they find themselves in. And that's something to be encouraged and nurtured.
I think just lastly, Tina, you've brought in an object from your creative life to share with us today. Can you tell us what it is and what's the story behind it?
It's a very small little thing.
Oh my gosh, is it a coin?
It's a coin. Every time I go to Venice, I go to a church called San Zaccaria.
Right.
And I put a coin into a box that turns a light on that illuminates a painting by Giovanni Bellini that was painted in about 1500. And it's an altarpiece showing the Virgin Mary holding the Christ child surrounded by saints. And to me, it is one of the most beautiful paintings. And I don't know why I love it so much, but I absolutely do. I always take a little pilgrimage to see it. And every time when it's illuminated. It's a little gasp of pleasure. And I sit there and I ponder it for a period of time, and I really, really always just find myself moved by the work. It was painted for that church, and it shows those figures with extraordinary veracity. They really do seem alive in an architectural space that seems to be part of the church. One of the contemporary shows that we visited when I was in Venice this time was by an Algerian artist based in Britain called Lydia Oramani, and it was in a little space run by a foundation quite far away from the main Biennale, and she had made this beautiful installation of works on the basis of a residency that she'd undertaken in Venice, where she thought very carefully about what it meant to be making art in a context like Venice, which is completely oversaturated with tourists, that is very challenging for ordinary Venetians to live in. The first work that you encountered was a box where you could put in a coin that she had actually removed from a church with permission from the church.
So similar to
So it was exactly the same mechanism. And you put in the coin and it just illuminated a window.
Wow.
And at the same time, all the lights in the building went on. And she was really wanting to meditate on the act of illumination and the transaction that takes place when a person, takes a coin and puts it into the box. And thinking about light as the mechanism for seeing and the tool that we need in order to see clearly. After we'd seen that exhibition, I took my little workshop crew to the church, my church, where my favourite Bellini painting was, and I sat them down in the pews and I went up and put a coin in the box, and the light went on and the painting was illuminated, and we all sat there for a minute. And for me, the contemporary work by this artist helped me understand that my gesture, my offering to the work, was a way of connecting with that work that was both transactional, it was actually putting
Physically.
money in a box,
Yeah.
but also it was a gesture of connection that allowed me to actually encounter the work in a particular way. What really came out of that experience was an understanding that contemporary art is connected to the past and provides a way of thinking about the past that doesn't emulate the past. She certainly wasn't painting a religious painting that belonged in a church. She was doing something completely contemporary, but it was still connected to that past in a way that allowed me to think critically and also engage in a very practical way. And it was quite a moment. I felt quite moved by it, and I think the people I was with, my workshop participants, understood that gesture and were able to link past and present. And in a way, that's where I trust art history can help us to understand the work that's being made in the present, but also to connect us to a past that enables us to see where we've come from, where we are, where we're heading. So that's my story.
I love it. Very profound.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in today, Tina.
It's been a pleasure.
That was Christina Barton, and I'm André Chumko. You can find more episodes of Articulate on YouTube, Spotify, or at thepost.co.nz/articulate. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.